Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution, and we're going to start diving into Yahusha. Who is Yahushua Elohim? How did he reveal himself in the New Covenant scriptures, in the New Covenant order? What is it he said about himself? Just his appearance, just his arrival was such a cataclysmic event that we need to focus on it, and we need to see that his whole reign is spiritual. This whole experience of deliverance is something that occurs spiritually. You can't find it anywhere on this earth. And it's hidden like breadcrumbs all through the text. And we're going to look at it. So today we're going to look at who is Yahushua Elohim. A new covenant order, a vein of deliverance. It's all part of who he is. It's his makeup, his divine personality, who he is. All through the New Covenant writings, there are wonderful truths like breadcrumbs, all pointing to who Yahusha truly is, where he came from, and what his mission still is today. What's his mission today? What does his name mean? Deliverance. I am your deliverance. So let's look in Matthew a little bit, because this is where Yahusha first steps into this realm as a man. This is the genealogy or the ancestry, family history of Yahusha the Messiah. He came from the bloodline of David, who was from the bloodline of Abraham. Let's unpack that a little bit. This whole genealogy, ancestry, why is this important? We often read past those sort of things, but let's look at it a little bit. A genealogy in this situation, in this case, is talking about a new creation. In Webster's dictionary, it says that genealogy is a line of descent traced continuously from an ancestor. That's what genealogy means, a line of descent traced continuously from an ancestor. Therefore, when we read the word genealogy, to us it means a list of names of distant family from the past that traces the beginning ancestors forward to Yahushua Messiah. That's what we would think. A whole list of names. However, in the Greek, the word is Genesis. Now we're getting somewhere. Genealogy shares the same root with Genesis. Yes, the same word used as the title for the first book of the scripture, Genesis or Bereshith, Genesis. So as we put on our first century Hebrew mindset, because that's how we've got to read the scriptures, we've got to know the context, know who the text is talking to before, afterwards, the people, the culture, the history. We've got to know where we are in history, in the timeline, in order to understand it. So as we put on our first century Hebrew mindset, a theme that flows throughout the gospel accounts and all of the New Covenant order actually, is that the arrival of Yahusha is to be viewed first and foremost as the beginning of a new creation order. That's how we're supposed to view Yahusha's arrival. First and foremost as the beginning of a new creation order, like a second Genesis. Paul also advances this theme in several of his letters. He says in 2 Corinthians, therefore, if anyone is united with Yahushua Messiah, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and look, what has come is fresh and new. So Paul understood this because he became a totally different person. And we saw his journey. John's gospel follows along this thought also, making a direct connection of Yahusha's arrival with the first and original Genesis. So we're talking about a first Genesis and a second Genesis, a first creation and a new creation, of which we just assume there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth at the end when Yahusha comes back. But what if his first arrival was the beginning of that new heaven and new? What if his arrival was the beginning of the process? That was the ball. He got the ball rolling through himself. His arrival was the beginning of the new heaven and new earth, the beginning of the new creation, of which we won't fully view until he arrives at the end of time, at the end of the sixth day. John understood this too. John's gospel follows along this thought about the original Genesis. That is, for John, while Yahusha is the creator of a second Genesis through a new blood covenant, he was also there to create the first Genesis, the original creation. So John's understanding that he's ushering in a new creation order, but he was also there for the first Genesis as well. Yahusha was there for the first Genesis. How is that possible? As John says in chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word. We know that's Yahusha. And the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim, still is Elohim. He was with Elohim in the beginning. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing made had being. With Elohim, and it implies plurality, but when you look at the Hebrew root and the word, in the Hebrew Elohim, it's not talking about plurality, it's talking about power. Uber, cosmic power. That's why the plurality is implied, but it's not plural, it's not multiple beings, it's just multiplicity of power. Multiplicity of power. Yeah, that's what it's implying. So John's saying that he was there in the beginning. Yahusha was there in the beginning. It's almost like he wanted to introduce himself to his creation just gently, just step by step, progressive revelation. First he appeared as a father, a creator. Now he's appearing as a son. It's all imagery. He appeared in Revelation as a lamb freshly slain. So who is he really? Is he the Father? Is he a lamb? Is he a burning bush? Is he a cloud of smoke? Is he a pillar of fire? What is he? Because he gives us all these images throughout the text so that we can understand him. But he actually is outside of all that. His cosmic, universal, eternal omnipresence and omnipotence is far beyond any of this. But make no mistake, it's Yahusha who was there in the beginning. Yahusha, the Aleph Tor. Paul in Romans chapter 5 expands that connection, and he makes Yahusha to be the ultimate second Adam. Another Genesis reference. First Adam and second Adam. So the best possible interpretation of the opening few words of Matthew should be, this is the book of the new creation, Genesis, established by Yahusha Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. This concept of Yahusha creating an actual, not a metaphorical, second Genesis, a full-on recreation is brought home to us all the more in the final book of the New Covenant order, which is Revelation. So it's not a metaphoric, it's a real second Genesis, a new creation. He's doing something new. Brought home in Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. This is where it's going to be completed. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had passed away, and the sea was no longer there. Also I saw this set-apart city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from Elohim. There will be no more mourning, crying, or pain, because the old order has passed away. Then the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making everything new. Who's the one sitting on the throne? Who's the one saying, I am making everything new? Write this. These words are true and trustworthy. These words are true and trustworthy. We can trust them. So there's 3 or 4 examples of where there's a new creation. These men understood something cataclysmic. This wasn't just another prophet, just another movement of Elohim's spirit. No. This was a new situation happening. Because Matthew was a Jewish believer, then his opening point is also to show that Yahusha meets all the requirements of the older scriptures. To be the Messiah of Elohim that the Hebrew people have longed for, since according to the scriptures, the true Messiah must be a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Jesse, and King David, which this genealogy proves. Notice also how the opening verse introduces the genealogy. That is, Yahusha's identity is summed up as simply the son of David and the son of Abraham. Why those 2 men? Because by saying that Yahusha is the son of David, the intent is to prove that he is royalty from the tribe of Judah through David, which makes him of the proper family line to rule. So if you are a Jew of the Hebrew line and you really needed this clarity of thought, you needed this, to be genuine, him to be genuine and to believe through the bloodline, all that stuff that went on, then guess what? Yahusha meets the bill. He's right there. He is legit. His bloodline is legit. He's from Judah through David. By saying also that he is the son of Abraham, it makes a firm connection that he is a fully fledged Hebrew and therefore eligible to bring about and fulfill the promises Yahuah made to Abraham in Genesis 12. Because these promises made to Abraham still haven't been fulfilled yet here at this stage either, because we know they were fulfilled in Yahusha. So he came as the son of David, royal, and the son of Abraham, meaning he's a Hebrew, that through Abraham all the families of the earth can be blessed. Remember that promise that Yahuah made with Abraham? Look at the stars, look at the sand, your descendants will be yada, yada, yada. And through your descendants, all the earth shall be blessed, can be blessed. Not will be, it's their choice, can be blessed. Yahusha is something altogether new. He ain't just Hebrew. So Matthew was Hebrew, so Matthew harps on the Hebrew a lot, but Yahusha is something altogether new. He ain't just Hebrew or royal, but a whole new species, an Elohim man fusion. So everybody likes to hone in on the royalty, the Jewish side, king of David, son of David, and everybody wants to hone in on the Hebrew aspect of it. Look, he's Abraham's son, lineage of Abraham, he's royal, all this sort of stuff. They want to hone in on that. Don't so much want to hone in on the fact that he's a new species. He was a man, but he was an Elohim man. I've never met any other Elohim men in my life, a fusion of both. Flesh and blood man, but yet could walk through walls, could disappear. He was a new being, a first fruit creation, and the spiritual door of a new reign, which his bride must enter to experience deliverance and life. We enter in through him. He said, unless you drink my blood, eat my flesh, partake of me, in other words, discern, understand, let me enter you. He's knocking on our heart. Enter you. Come in, dine and sup with you. Unless we are entering in through him as the narrow gate, we can't even see his reign. Unless you're born of water and the Spirit, he says. He said that to Nicodemus. You can't even see the reign. It's a spiritual reign. And it's right here in Matthew chapter 1. The spiritual reign through a spiritual Elohim man fusion hybrid being. That's who he was. So this is the genealogy of Yahusha the Messiah from the bloodline of David, bloodline of Abraham. And that's all his genealogy to prove that he was from the bloodline of Abraham and the bloodline of David. All that there, the genealogy. And you'll notice in purple, which is very unheard of in Hebrew lineages and bloodlines and genealogies, I should say. The purple, Tamar is written there, Rahab from Jericho, Ruth is written in there, Bathsheba. In today's age, we go, oh, so what? Well, back then you never mentioned the women in the genealogy. So why is Matthew mentioning these 4 Hebrew women? The naming of 4 Gentiles, and they were Gentiles too. They weren't even Hebrews. And this is important stuff here. This is the birth of the promised Messiah. And we've got these filthy Gentiles in their genealogy. Come on, Matthew, what's going on? The naming of these 4 Gentile women in Matthew's Hebrew genealogy of Yahusha is very rare. So the message is clear that although Yahusha is thoroughly Hebrew, he is thoroughly Hebrew, Jewish of the royal lineage of David, and born of a Jewish woman in the set-apart Holy Land, deep down in his being and essence there are traces of Gentile connections that cannot be ignored. And even more interesting is that, except for Ruth, the background of the other 3 women is less than moral and upstanding. So, Yahusha's rubbing shoulders with the Gentiles already. This is a shadow of the nations entering the reign through a spiritual new covenant order. Even in his genealogy, it's proof. And even through all the older scriptures, we saw Gentiles, the nations, being welcomed into Israel, welcomed into the tent, into the camp. Just get rid of all your idolatry and come and devote yourselves to Elohim. So Gentiles have always been welcome. So after the house of Judah was taken to Babylon, Jehoiakim was the father of Shealtiel. This was the guy around the time of Babylonian captivity, which we dealt with in Ezekiel. This was an event. Why is Matthew mentioning the captivity in the genealogy? Because this was an event that would forever change the Jews. They lost their promised land. They lost their temple of Solomon. This was an event that would forever change the Jews. So for them, the term deliverance had always meant being set free from the oppression of a Gentile conqueror. The oppression of a Gentile conqueror. Ever since the temple of Solomon was torn down and the Jews were taken into Babylonian captivity, they have always been oppressed. Ever since. So for them in the natural, deliverance just means being free from their oppressors. However, the arrival of Yahusha takes on new meaning as being set free from sin and eternal death. But for them in the natural, they just wanted to deliver it, to take them out of their oppression so they could have their own land, their own freedoms again. But as we know, that wasn't going to happen because of their disobedience to the covenant. They were divorced. It was never going to happen again. Jacob was the father of Joseph, who married Mary, the mother of Yahusha, who is called the Messiah. So Matthew is careful to make Joseph Mary's husband, but not the biological father of her child. But at the same time, he makes Mary Yahusha's biological mother, because that's the truth of it. So there were 14 generations from Abraham to David. Remember this? Matthew says there were 14 generations from Abraham to David, another 14 generations from David until the people were captured and exiled to Babylon. Then there were another 14 more generations from the time of the exile to Babylon until the Messiah was born. So you've got 14, 14, and 14. What's that about? Let's have a look. A little chart there. You've got 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to the captivity, and from the captivity, 14 generations from there to Yahusha. 3 lots of 14. Let's tie this in with Daniel a little bit, his end-time prophecies. We should also not overlook the use of the number 42. What is 42 got to do with it? Where do we get 42 from? 14 plus 14 plus 14 makes 42. All right? 3 lots of 14 makes 42. So let's not overlook this number 42. From Abraham to Yahusha is 42. 14 plus 14 plus 14. 3 lots of generations, 14 in each. So 42. The prophet Daniel, upon whom so much of Revelation is based, speaks of the end times and the rule of the anti-Messiah, using the key numbers 1260 days, 3.5 years, the prophecy, and 42 months. It's all the same time. 3.5 years, 42 months, and 1260 days is all the same time. It's all 3.5 years, which is half of the 7-year prophecy. Is Matthew saying there is a connection between Yahusha's genealogy, David's name, Daniel's end-time prophecies, and therefore the ultimate purpose of his coming? Is Matthew saying this? That even in Yahusha's genealogy, there are signs of what he's going to do. He's going to put an end to the reign of the anti-Messiah. He's going to, and how is that? What is the reign of the anti-Messiah? People are looking for a being these days. They're looking for a big hybrid monster, like a Nephilim type creature in these last days that Satan's going to inhabit. They're not understanding the prophecy of the abomination of desolation, which is not just going to be in one man, the man of sin, the son of perdition. No, it's going to be in every single person. Every single person. The abomination of desolation, seated in the set-apart place, seated in the temple of Elohim. The only temple that Yahusha is interested in these days is these human vessels. And there are 8 billion or so of them full of demonic activity, full of spirits in high places, influencing, pulling the strings. And of course, because there is no deliverance outside of Yahusha, 8 billion people have a spirit in their flesh controlling them. Since their birth, since Adam, the corrupt seed, the sin in their flesh, there is a corrupt spirit in our flesh controlling us. And so all this is connected to the anti-Messiah, the rule, the reign, the spirit in our flesh controlling. And so Satan is, of course, running the show. And through this genealogy, the 42 months, Matthew is saying that there's going to be deliverance. There will be deliverance. Deliverance is the only goal of Yahusha's arrival. So in a nutshell, without going into all these deep, dark charts and eschatological events, the whole point of it is that Yahusha came to bring deliverance. Deliverance from the spirit in our flesh, deliverance from the abomination of desolation, deliverance from the anti-Messiah's reign, rule. He came to lay it all waste. You think you're going to lay waste my creation? I've come to lay you waste. He came to make, death. He brought death into captivity. So deliverance is the only goal of Yahusha's arrival. And we're only in the first few verses here. See how even the text, when you put your spiritual eyes on, in the abstract, you can see Yahusha came to bring deliverance. Yahusha, the ultimate king and son of David, lion from the tribe of Judah, who opened the scrolls, will eradicate all last day anti-Messiah activity through a complete destruction of sin and then a final consummation of his new eternal covenant order. That eradication of sin, that process has begun. That process of deliverance from sin, deliverance from the spirit in our flesh, that has begun. Only for the bride though, only those who have entered the vein, the narrow gate of deliverance, because you can only get that out of you, the spirit that controls us. You can only get that out of us through Yahusha's spirit and through a process, a baptism of fire. It's all here in the scriptures. Put your abstract spiritual goggles on and you can see it. The conclusion so far in this first chapter's genealogy, before Yahusha even steps onto the scene, the conclusion is that both Jew and Gentile will be welcome in Yahusha's new covenant order. A second Genesis, where the veil will be rent again and access made available for all who repent and follow him, follow Yahusha in through the vein of deliverance and transformation. So we can see this. We can see these gems. This is how you should read the scriptures, guys. Don't just read it like you've been told to read it. Listen, read the text and hear what he's saying to you in it. We're just in the first chapter, just in this, what we would consider boring genealogy. And look what we've got out of it already. A new creation happened. This is how the birth of Yahusha the Messiah happened. His mother Mary was engaged to marry Joseph. But before they married, he learned that she was pregnant by the power of Elohim's spirit. Yahuah had already given his first wife Israel a certificate of divorce. And so after 500 years of silence, this is where he left his throne. This is where he dumped his old self, his old name, and metamorphed into a brand new creation of flesh and blood to be the deliverer for his new bride. Hold on to that thought. Historically in the timeline, this is where that happened. Yahuah left his throne, became a new creation, a child, flesh and blood. So, Mary's found to be pregnant, which is a great shame in this culture. And Joseph's not the father because he knows he hasn't slept with her yet. They're not even married. They're betrothed, which is the same in this culture as being married. They just hadn't come together yet and consummated. So you can imagine the pressure that's on Joseph. He had the legal right to, publicly shame her. But Joseph, being good, righteous, and obedient, didn't want to cause Mary any public disgrace, shame, or embarrassment, so he planned to divorce her secretly. Which says a lot about Joseph's character, the man who raised Yahusha. Joseph decided not to accuse his betrothed of marital infidelity, the remedy being to out her publicly and to shame her publicly in order to avoid himself being shamed. He didn't want to, he'd be a patsy otherwise. You're going to take on this woman or not publicly shame her according to the Torah of Moses? She should be taken out and stoned for adultery. He chose not to do that. He chose her over himself. He chose his wife over himself and the shame that might come on them. Rather, he would quietly give her a letter of divorce to Mary's father. She was still living at home, and end the betrothal, handling the matter discreetly and privately. So he planned to divorce her because, she'd done the wrong thing according to him. According to most, if your wife's pregnant before you even come together, she's done something wrong, hasn't she? So he was just going to end it discreetly. While one of the several purposes of Yahusha's speeches was to teach the Jewish people that while the Torah was right and good behavior, doing obedience mechanically or woodenly without love, take note of this, please. Doing the Torah obediently, mechanically or woodenly without love, without transitioning it all into Yahusha to start with, and his royal laws of love. Doing the old scriptures without love, without understanding the spirit of the entire Torah laws, actually perverted it. Yes, doing Torah, you can be wrong. You can be wrong doing Torah, and you can be perverting it by not doing the royal laws of love, because all Torah and prophets, Yahusha brought in a new covenant and new commandments of love. Love Elohim with all your heart, mind, body, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Joseph understood the royal spirit within the law of Moses. He understood the behavior. He understood his rights. She was wrong. He was going to put her aside quietly and gently instead of making a big kerfuffle about it. How dare this woman shame me? This man's ripped me off. I wanted a clean bride, all this sort of stuff. He could have done all that. But Joseph understood the behavior, the spirit within the laws of Moses, and knew that even in his gut-wrenching circumstance, he was to act in love and not vengeance, even though he was to obey the Torah still. So he risked his own reputation and having shame being brought upon himself on account of his betrothed wife being pregnant without any believable explanation. He behaved exactly how Yahusha wants us to behave today, not by ignoring Yahusha's word or his commands, not by applying our own sense of mercy or justice or to any given situation, doing things our own way, no, but rather by doing the two royal commandments of love, as I just mentioned. It's all about love. That's why we're going through the fruits of the Spirit, the fruits of love, righteousness, righteous behavior. So he's decided to keep it quiet, but to put her aside. But no sooner had Joseph thought about this that an angel of Yahuah came to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child inside her has been conceived by the set-apart Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you will name him Yahusha, meaning I am your deliverer. So make sure you give him that name, because he will deliver his people from their sins. Doesn't say he will deliver his people from the Romans, does it? From their captivity? No, from their sins. The bigger issue at hand ever since Adam. Because remember, he's the second Adam. Yahusha is the second Adam. So he's going to deliver them from their sins. And what is sin? Anything against Yahusha's word. And really, what do we need to be delivered from? The spirit in our flesh that causes us to sin constantly. So the reason for Yahusha's name is because he's going to deliver people from their sins. In other words, from the corrupt spirit that controls them and causes them to sin. All this happened to fulfill what Elohim had said through the prophet. The virgin will be pregnant and will give birth to a son, and they will name him Emmanuel, meaning Elohim is with us. Elohim is with us. Elohim has literally left his throne and come to be with us, amongst us. We can hug him. We can touch him. We can embrace him. Elohim is with us. And they've missed it. People don't even believe that Yahusha is Elohim. If you don't believe Yahusha is Elohim, you don't have deliverance, because what did he come to do? To deliver us. So you've got to believe in him and who he is. So let's look at this Old Covenant connection. Let's keep the Old Covenant in its place. It's a historic document, but Let's bring all that Mary and Joseph are going through into a heavenly orientation as opposed to just an earthly perspective. That is, despite the terribly difficult circumstance that the couple are facing, despite this, there is a reason for it that goes well beyond their wants and needs. It is because Elohim, through his prophets, prophesied that the Messiah would come into the world in just this way. And the precise prophecy from 700 years earlier is quoted out of the book of Isaiah. So Isaiah said this 700 years before Yahushua arrived. He said, "Therefore Yahuwah himself will give you people a sign. The young woman will become pregnant, bear a son, and name him Emmanuel," which means Elohim is with us. This directly connects the Old Covenant historic document to Mary's pregnancy. In fact, Yahusha's birth, his life, his death and resurrection are all foretold in the Old Scriptures. So in the New Covenant order, we have the record of the old prophecies all coming to fruition. So why would we live in the old prophecies when we've got the one among us? We've got Emmanuel. We've got Emmanuel. Elohim is with us. Why are we looking back there when we've got him right here in our midst? And now, of course, we have him inside us. Why would we be going back there? That was all a schoolmaster, signs and shadows to point us to this amazing being who now lives within us, if you've invited him in. So when Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of Elohim told him, of course, and straight away married Mary. But Joseph did not know her. In other words, he did not have sex with her until she gave birth to their firstborn son, and he named him Yahusha. The text is very important to say that, so there can be no confusion. Oh, maybe they came together and maybe she slept with him and then maybe he's just an earthly child. Maybe he's just Joseph's son. Maybe there's people today, better get a DNA test. That woman had multiple partners. It could be, no, it may not be Elohim's child. No, see how the text clearly says Joseph did not sleep with his wife until after Yahushua was born. So there can be no dispute that Yahusha is divine. His blood, which comes from the man, the father I should say, which comes from, in his case, Elohim, because Mary provided the flesh, the bones, the egg, and the seed, the sperm came from the father, from Elohim. So his blood was divine. That's why it's all about his blood. Because the life, as we know in Scripture, life is in the blood. Therefore, sin is in the blood. Therefore, the curse goes on and on and on. And Yahushua came to deliver us from the curse by becoming the curse. Cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree. He hung on the tree. He became the curse for us. This is what real love looks like in action. Within our marriage, within our family life, within our business, within our local community. We can know all the Scripture in our mind. We can know all the Scriptures, back to front, upside down, and quoted. But if the royal laws of Yahusha's love do not drive us to behave in the divine fruits of righteousness, then what do we really know? What do we really experience? Yahushua came to deliver his chosen bride from the abomination of desolation. Remember the 42? 14 plus 14 plus 14 equals 42, which of course is implying that Yahushua came to deliver his chosen bride from the abomination of desolation. It's all there in the numbers. The corrupt seed that controls her flesh since birth, in order for her to follow him through a baptism of spirit and a baptism of fire in preparation for his return. Yes, we're following him. He does not ask anything of us that he did not go through himself. He went through the spirit. He went through the fire. None of us will ever go through what he went through, the culmination of his torture and suffering. We are sharers in his sufferings and his trials and persecutions, but we will never truly grasp what he went through. So he does not put too much on us that we cannot handle. He promises that. But we are following him through the vein. We call it a vein because we're following, like following a stream, following a river, following a vein of gold through the rock. We're following this path, this narrow gate onto a narrow path. How to become a new creation. Yahushua is a new creation, and we're to follow him. His disciples did not love their lives to the death. Yahushua said, pick up your torture stake and follow me. Where do we follow him? To the death of the self. In other words, you don't go and jump off a bridge. It's not our fleshly self. It's the spirit in our flesh. He wants to use our vessel to possess our vessel. And in order for that, we need to push ourselves aside. Our mindset, our personalities, our sins, our bad habits, reputations, tastes, everything we've filled ourselves with has to be pushed aside, burnt out of us. And the only way to do that is to go down the path that Yahusha went. How to become a new creation through Yahusha's vein of deliverance. Deliverance is so important. It's so important that that's his name. I am your deliverance. It's right there in his name. He spent thousands of years from creation, really. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. He spent all this time showing his people that I am Yahuah, I am one. Elohim will only ever be one at any given time. There's only ever one. So, him talking to himself to prove a point, to be a servant king, is all part and parcel with him being Elohim. Then we go through a spirit baptism. This is where he baptizes us in spirit. He gives us a new heart, a new spirit. He puts the incorruptible seed, the seed of eternal life within us. This is where we're born, begotten, born anew, born of water and the spirit, as Yahusha said to Nicodemus. Unless you go through this process, you can't even see the reign. You can't even see my kingdom. It's a spiritual kingdom. You have to become spiritual to enter it. Your being has to be lit up. You have to be able to see out your eyes, see the text, see things in the spirit. And of course, the biggest, best part of the spirit baptism is you can hear his voice. He enters you. He says, I knock on the door of your heart. Open up to me. Let me in so I can come and sup and be with you. And you can hear my voice. My sheep hear my voice. Then he puts us through a baptism of fire, which is like a cauldron. Hebrews 12 calls it a flogging and cleansing, teaching, rebuking, chastising, so that we will overcome the spirit and bad habits in our flesh. That doesn't happen here in the spirit. The spirit gives us the power to start overcoming, but it's through the fire, the pain. People won't talk about the pain, the agony, the torment, the depression, the anxiety, the stress, the sheer agony of going through Yahusha's fire. When he doesn't like something, he shows you. And it doesn't matter how much you want to blame everybody else around you, it's still in there with you. Until you get rid of your bad habits, get rid of your fleshly mindset, get rid of everything he hates in your being, because he wants to possess you. And when you finally allow him to do that and get through, change your behavior. The only sign of an intelligent person is someone who can hear the word and alter their behavior. It's got nothing to do with memorization, nothing to do with worldly knowledge, religious knowledge, nothing to do with scriptural knowledge either. True intelligence in Yahusha's economy, in his reign, is simply someone who can hear my word and do it. Alter your behavior, change from something old into something new. That is Yahusha's definition of what being smart is. So are you smart or are you dumb? We don't like hearing that we're dumb, do we? But look at your behaviors, look at your habits. Have they changed recently? Because when they do, and we're allowing Yahusha to flow through us and be possessed, we're in the wilderness. We're in that wilderness. In Revelation, it speaks about the woman who's whisked away. Her child is whisked away into the wilderness, the man-child, the remnant. Whisked away into the wilderness for 3.5 years to be protected from the filth of the dragon. Well, that's a spiritual awareness, a place that we enter. Maturity. He wants us to be ye set apart, be ye perfect as I am. It means mature. And maturity can only be in the righteous behavior, the two royal laws of loving. So that's pretty exciting. That's just where we're going today to see just from Yahusha's birth. And he hasn't even been born yet. Matthew's just explaining the fact Yahusha's not even born yet. But Yahuah has left his throne and become a new creation. And we're seeing the history of how it all happened. And it's so exciting to see with our spiritual eyes on, just how Yahusha came to just blow the lid on the whole situation. He came to prove that his reputation is not who they all say he is, just as he's doing it today. And as we go on, we're going to see all this amazing stuff, the signs in the heavens to announce his arrival. We're going to see what John the Baptist said about him, all these things that Yahusha did to disturb the people. When his word comes into a situation, it's a sword to disturb, to, ruin our plans for the day, to, totally disrupt our mind and our ways of doing things, because he is new. He is the new creation, the new covenant order. He came to bring new things. And I hope and pray that you can enter this vein of deliverance so that you can see everything you've been through. Your whole life is leading you to this place where Yahushua wants to speak to you, into you, and transform you into something new. He wants you to become a new creation, just like him. Be back shortly, brothers and sisters. Love you very much. This is what we're learning, how to become new creatures. Who is Yahushua Elohim? Who is he? We're finding out.
There's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. There's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. If you ain't got the vein, then shut your face, you ain't qualified to speak. If you ain't faith, the spirit, and the fire, just a controlling free. Oh, there's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. There's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. But you can't find the vein without the gate, Yahusha Elohim. If you don't see Yahuah metamorph, your eyes are completely dim. Oh, there's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. No other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. Cause the vein is the golden thread of truth that runs right through his word. Yahusha's voice is calling you to know it's him you've heard. Oh, there's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. No other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. If you ain't thrown your life into the fire to be his chosen bride, if you ain't got behavior purified, you're on the road so wide. Oh, there's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. Oh, no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. If you ain't got the vein, shut your face, you ain't qualified to speak. If you ain't been to spirit and the fire, you're just a controlling free. Oh, there's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. No other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. If you ain't got the vein, shut your face, you ain't qualified to speak. If you ain't got the spirit and the fire, you're just a controlling free. There's no other way but the vein, gotta burn to learn. No other way but the vein, gotta burn to learn. Oh, there's no other way but the vein, you gotta burn to learn. No other way but the vein, gotta burn to learn.